I'm joined now by the co-host of Pod Save America, Dan Pfeiffer. Dan, thanks for joining me.
Happy to see you, Brian.
So we've just watched as the Democratic candidate defeated a Republican in a district that Donald Trump won just last year by 17 points, and they did so by 14 points, meaning it's a 32-point swing. Already, we've seen some Republicans coming out and offering some excuses like this is, a low turnout election because, it's a special election, we're in an off year. How much of a problem are these election results in Texas for the GOP as we head toward midterms?
Look, I've said many, many times over the years that special elections are not particularly predictive. They are things where Democrats tend to do better because our coalition is now disproportionately made up of people who vote all the time. And as we saw in 2024, Republicans benefit from higher turnout. And sometimes when you get results that are shocking, it's because, one party got caught napping, or as you mentioned, it's a really low turnout election. That's not what happened here, right? The Trump endorsed the Republican. The Republican Party spent money in this race. The Republican outspent the Democrat by several fold, and the Democrat still won. And so if you're on the ballot anywhere in Texas or frankly around the country, should scare the crap out of you, because are you not saying that we're going to get a plus 31, plus 32 Democratic environment, but this just means that a whole bunch of races that were not on the map before are on the map now.
Can you talk about the fact that this electorate was 51% Republican, 35% Democrat, and 14% independent. Yep. But the Democratic candidate, Taylor Remmitt, won with like 57% of the vote. And so mathematically, the only way to have done that is to have gotten votes and support from Republican voters and independent voters. I mean, how are you thinking about that as we move forward?
That's the part that should really scare Republicans, because a lot of times when you see these Democratic results, sometimes you'll see it like it's a state house race in Montana in a district Trump won by 36, the Democrat loses by 12, and then you look at the results and you see there's just this massively disproportionate Democratic turnout. Just our party turned out at insane levels. Not enough to win sometimes in these districts, but to make the races much closer than they are. That is absolutely not what happened here. This district is in Tarrant County. It is the epicenter of the Texas Republican Party. It's sort of a power center for the MAGA movement, the far right Christian movement. And the way that the Democrat won is, yes, we had great turnout from the Democratic base, but it's because persuaded basically every independent who voted to vote for the Democrat and a decent chunk of Republicans. And and notably also as well, this is important. I think this is, you can see this in the independent numbers, is there are a number of heavily Latino precincts in this district. Yep. And from the early results we've seen, and we have to get some more granular detail, but it seems like, and math would suggest, that the Latino vote swung back hard to the Democrats.
And I think that poses a pretty serious problem for Republicans as we move forward, because they built their new map that would give them 5 new seats on this idea, predicated on this idea that Latinos swinging super heavily to the Republicans and Trump in 2024 was a permanent move. And that's how they built their gerrymander. And so we could be in a world where not only do we not see 5 seats get handed from Democrats to Republicans, but if those margins were drawn so thin and we see a big blue wave election, not just where we're seeing high turnout from Democrats, but where we're seeing Republicans and independents defect and vote for the Democratic candidates in numbers that we saw just yesterday, we could see a world where this new map, it turns into a dummy mander and actually Democrats net seats from Texas.
This map still remains pretty hard because they did a pretty good job of fortifying some of their members as they did this, but the Democrats, they're trying to vote out along the border, like Henry Cuellar, Vicente Gonzalez. If the Republicans are really suffering this much with Latinos in Texas, those races are not going to be competitive. And some of the new districts they drew depend heavily on this. So we could draw even here potentially. Obviously, if you have a plus 31 Democratic advantage, we're going to crush everywhere across Texas, across the country. We'll pick up, 70, 80 seats or whatever that would be. But the Republicans made a bet here, and that bet, not only did it not last for a generation, it didn't even last for a year.
We also, I'm sure, both saw the numbers of, in terms of the expenditures in this campaign. I'm going to put right up here on the screen an image that Amanda Littman shared, the founder of Run for Something. This image right here shows like the massive disparity that we have between what the Republicans had and what the Democrats had. And yet still you had a Democratic candidate flip this seat by 32 points from what we saw in 2024. What does that suggest moving forward, that even a boatload of money wasn't enough to win this race for the GOP?
Yeah, I mean, it speaks to their problem, because in these special elections, this is what we saw happen in the district in Tennessee 7 late last year, is the party with the partisan advantage can usually hold on and win because they have enough money to tell voters the election is happening. And this time they had that money and it did not work, because it wasn't that they told Republicans to vote, and then some of those Republicans and all those independents voted against the Republican. And the other thing that I think is important here, and I think this provides larger context for how much the politics have shifted over the last few months, is so this was a runoff election. The original election, what happened in November. And in November, when you added up all the Republicans and the Democrats, the Republicans had a 5-point advantage, right? Which was very good for the Democrat, meant that they were in striking distance, is why some people had this election like on their radar screen. And so it shifted dramatically from a 5-point Republican advantage to a 14-point Democratic advantage since November to now. And that says a lot about, we can't attribute this entirely to what's happening in Minnesota, ICE, Venezuela, all of the things that have been happening with Trump over the last few months. But it does speak to how fired up Democrats have gotten over the last few weeks and how disillusioned Republicans have gotten. And so disillusioned that they'll vote against the Republican.
What do you think that principal driver is? And by the way, I say this knowing that it may very well not be one specific thing, but these are pretty huge numbers, and especially the defection numbers are what I'm looking at.
Yeah, it is. There's nothing that would suggest that there would be this huge increase in people upset with Trump over affordability from November to now. And the thing that's really changed is just this feeling of chaos that is sort of permeating the country because of what's been happening in Minnesota and Maine and elsewhere. And so, I really am hesitant to speculate, because there's no exit polls here. We don't know what was on top of people's minds, but I don't think you can separate the shift from November till now from what's happening in the larger political environment. And that's been defined by ICE in Minnesota for, almost a month now.
So I guess the question becomes, does Trump see this and kind of like shift gears, or because it's Trump, because any concession to the other side is viewed as capitulation, which is viewed as weakness, he's never going to do that. And so what do you expect to see as far as Trump is concerned? Do you think that he uses this and says like, okay, we have to change course a little bit, or just triple down?
I think it's like one step forward, 2 steps backwards all the time with Trump. Like maybe he'll call Tom Homan today and be like, slow it down. And then the next day, Stephen Miller will be in his ear and we'll do the opposite. So you don't really know. I think where it has some impact is on Republicans as we debate in Congress what sort of ICE guardrails can be put into the spending bill. There's a world where in a different political environment, the Republicans will be relishing a shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security and ICE. And the fact that they're not, and that Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, is going to bend over backwards to try to get this bill passed on Monday or Tuesday, speaks to, I think, just the increasing political pressure on this issue.
What about from Democrats' vantage? I'm seeing a lot of posts and statements from, Hakeem Jeffries and Ken Martin and Chuck Schumer that they are, look, I think if I was in their position too, I would also be taking credit for what's happening right now. And frankly, at the end of the day, they are in charge, so they can take credit. But also, I'm just curious because, on one hand, there is obviously a lot of anti-Trump sentiment, if not all anti-Trump sentiment, that's driving this. And so to what extent do you think that Democrats should or could take credit here versus are just kind of coasting off of what we're seeing Trump do and reaping the benefits of that?
I think most of what has been happening, almost all of the positive things that have happened in terms of resisting Trump, of sort of sending a message to Trump, have happened from outside of Washington, not inside of Washington, from the bottom up, not the top down. Yeah. I think the DNC spent money here. They should get credit for doing that. If the Democratic Legislative Committee spent money here, they should get credit for doing that. But the reality of what's happening is happening on the ground, and it's happening in spite of, not because of, leadership from Washington.
And so is there some concern that will kind of like ping pong back and forth, that because because some of the leadership in the Democratic Party is going to look at this and say, we fixed it. You know, the brand is fixed. We're winning again. We can take all this credit. We don't have to release any autopsies. Like, we'll just keep doing what we're doing and keep on keeping on. And, you know, kind of end up in a situation where, okay, we haven't really done anything substantively to fix the Democratic brand, but they've seen all these wins, and so they get the wrong message out of it. And then, you know, we're in a position where Democrats have control, and all of the things that led them to lose in 2024 rear their heads again because they were never actually rectified.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things that are going to happen on the interim. I think in the short term, this election victory is going to stiffen some Democrats' spines to use the limited leverage they have in these negotiations over ICE guardrails. I think it will encourage more Democrats to speak out more boldly about what's happening with ICE, although I think for the most part, they've been pretty good since the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. Not everyone, but for the most part, you're getting less hemming and hawing from Democrats about what Trump is doing and what ICE is doing. So that's good. So I think it stiffens the spines. I think the big concern is if we have a very good 2026, does the party make the same mistake they made after 2022 and view that as a validation of themselves as opposed to a response to something else, right? 2022 was about Dobbs, not a show of support for Joe Biden. The Biden White House and a lot of Democrats read that as the wrong way. And so I think I could go on and on and on about the medium-term and long-term challenges the Democratic Party has, regardless of what happens in 2026. But we have a ton of work to do. And so the hope is we have a great year. We recognize that we benefited greatly from anger against Trump, prices being high. But once we get into an actual election where a Democrat presidential candidate is on the ballot against a Republican presidential candidate in that much larger electorate that doomed us in 2024, we got some real work to do.
And to that end, in terms of what we can hope to accomplish as we head toward midterms, where's your head at? Obviously, I think we're all kind of aligned on the House, but where's your head at on the Senate?
You know, I feel I am cautiously optimistic about the Senate. I think, look, you see these results in Texas, that should give you even an additional belief that there is a path to a Senate seat in Texas with the right candidate running the right campaign. But, you know, the political environment, if it is in our favor, we have shots. Like, I think we can defend all of our incumbents. Not easy, right? Like, we have to win our open seat in New Hampshire, win our open seat in Minnesota. We have to win an open seat in Michigan, which is the toughest of them all. And John Ossoff's got to get reelected. Those are all about as good as you would expect them to be at this exact point. We have good candidates on all those races, and the Republicans aren't awesome in those races. Although in Michigan, I think Mike Rogers is hard to beat. Not impossible, but he's you know, he almost won in 2024. And then we got to do well we got to win in North Carolina. We have a great candidate, and we got to win in Maine where we have a primary coming. And, you know, because those are the purple-ish states. And then we got to win 2 of what I think is now 5 red states. So you were talking about Ohio with Sherrod Brown. We are talking about Texas. We were talking about Alaska with Mary Peltola. We were talking about Iowa, where we have a bunch of candidates, all interesting on paper. We'll see how they look as we go through this primary. And then you know, I think there is an interesting question about Florida. Like, Florida is a very, very hard state. You know, we now have Alexander Vindman running. He's a candidate who raised a ton of money on the first day. I'm always skeptical of a candidate who is like very famous to the resistance crowd, is 100% Iowa, you know, MSNBC, Pod Save America, name ID. But here's the thing I'd say. Trump won Florida by the same amount he won Texas by.
Yeah.
And so, like, we should keep an eye on it, and possibly, you know, the Republican could not be more generic. It's the woman who took Marco Rubio's seat. No one has any idea who she is. She's a generic Republican. Is not what you want to be these days. So, like, let's keep an eye on it. Like, basically, we want as many paths to 52 as we can, to 51 as we can get, and that's another potential one. And that's not even talking. We haven't even really brought up Nebraska, where you have independent Dan Osborne running against Pete Ricketts. Yeah,
well, a lot to look forward. Look, I want to say for everybody who's watching, listening right now, the best analysis online is from Dan on Messagebox, which is his newsletter. I could not recommend highly enough that if you've not yet subscribed to Messagebox, please go ahead and do so. I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. It is the smartest analysis, the best analysis, and it is always correct. So just go ahead and do that.
Thank you, Brian.
Go ahead and subscribe if you're not yet subscribed. And I'll put that link again right here on the screen and also in the post description. Dan, as always, thanks for the time.
Always good.